The elegant cream-colored envelope, adorned with the subtle emblem of Liberty Savings and Loan, lay innocently amidst the mundane clutter of my morning mail. I nearly overlooked it, preoccupied with deciphering the cryptic codes on my utility bills. It wasn't until my third cup of herbal tea that I finally picked it up, curiosity piqued by its unfamiliar presence. I certainly hadn't conducted any transactions with Liberty Savings. Tearing open the seal, my gaze scanned the initial lines, and a shiver, cold as winter's first breath, snaked down my spine. My hands trembled as I read the first line. A familiar chill, like the touch of a ghost, whispered across my skin. Dear Ms. Evelyn Reed, this is a reminder regarding your overdue mortgage payment. The figures that followed sent my head spinning, an impossible $9,876.54. What in the world? I murmured, my voice barely a whisper, as I continued to read. The letter claimed I was delinquent on my second payment for a $1,200,000 mortgage loan, supposedly initiated in March. Failure to settle the arrears within 2 weeks would force the bank to commence foreclosure proceedings. My first instinct was to call and clarify the obvious error. I, a 67-year-old widow, had never, not in a million years, taken out such an astronomical loan. My cozy little home on Primrose Lane, lovingly purchased with Arthur 32 years ago, had been paid off for ages. Why would I at my age suddenly incur such a colossal debt? I dialed the Liberty Savings and Loan number listed, enduring an agonizingly long hold before a saccharine sweet voice finally chirped, Liberty Savings, how may I help you? Hello, this is Evelyn Reed. I've received a bewildering letter about a late loan payment, but there must be a mistake. I never took out any loan from your institution. One moment, Ms. Reed. I'll verify that information, the operator replied, her tone polite but distant. While she investigated, my eyes drifted towards my compact, yet meticulously maintained, garden outside the kitchen window. Arthur had passed 10 years prior, leaving me to navigate life alone, slowly adapting to the quiet rhythm of widowhood. 43 years together, and then, emptiness. No, not entirely. I had Olivia and Michael, my children, but they'd long since embarked on their own bustling lives, their thoughts rarely turning to their aging mother. Ms. Reed? The operator's voice jolted me back to the stark reality. According to our records, on March 14th of this year, you indeed secured a mortgage loan totaling $1,200,000 for a period of 30 years. The loan was for the acquisition of property at Lakeview Heights, number 27 in Springfield. But that's utterly impossible. I exclaimed, my voice rising. I've never signed any documents for a loan, especially not for such a staggering sum. We possess all the requisite documentation, Ms. Reed, including your signed loan agreement, copies of your passport, social security number, and tax returns for the past 3 years. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Someone had brazenly exploited my identity to procure a monstrous loan. This is fraud, I stated, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. Someone has stolen my personal information. In that case, Ms. Reed, you should file a police report, the operator advised, a hint of steel in her tone. And you'll need to visit our main office with identification for a formal inquiry. However, I must caution you that until this situation is resolved, the bank will hold you responsible for the loan payments. I slowly lowered the receiver, my hands visibly shaking. Who could have done such a thing? Who had access to my private documents? Suddenly, my phone chirped. My daughter's name, Olivia, flashed across the screen. Mom, did you remember it's Chloe's birthday today? Olivia's voice, devoid of a greeting, immediately launched into her agenda. We're expecting you at 3 o'clock, and please don't wear that ghastly green cardigan. It's a rather upscale restaurant, not your garden shed. Chloe, my granddaughter, was turning 12. Of course, I remembered, and her gift, a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny star charm, was already prepared. I remember Olivia, I replied, but I have a rather serious problem. Mom, don't start that again. Olivia interrupted with barely concealed exasperation. If it's another credit card advertisement, just toss it. How many times do I have to tell you, you don't need to open every piece of junk mail? Olivia, this isn't about advertisements. Someone's taken out almost $1,200,000 in credit under my name. There was a stunned silence on the line. What kind of nonsense is this, Mom? Olivia finally managed, a nervous chuckle escaping her lips. Who would grant such a colossal loan to a retiree? You must be confused. I am not confused. I retorted, my patience wearing thin. I have a letter in black and white, detailing a $1,200,000 loan issued in my name, supposedly with my signature. Mom, your blood pressure must be sky high again. Olivia's voice adopted that overly sweet, solicitous tone that always signaled her extreme annoyance. Are you absolutely sure you took your pills today? Stop talking to me like I'm a senile old woman. I rarely raised my voice, but the frustration was boiling over. I am perfectly lucid and I know exactly what's happening. Someone has stolen my identity and taken out a fraudulent loan, and I intend to report it to the police. The police? Oh my heavens, Mom, are you trying to humiliate us in front of the entire town? Olivia's voice was tinged with panic. Look, I'll come over after work, I'll examine this letter, and we'll sort it out. But for goodness sake, don't make any calls, all right? All right, I conceded, feeling a peculiar sense of bewilderment at her intense reaction. Come by after work. Hanging up, I pondered my daughter's strangely agitated response. Was she simply overly anxious about the prospect of involving the authorities? Olivia was usually the first to advise me against making a fuss over nothing. To distract myself from the spiraling anxieties, I decided to prepare for Chloe's party. I retrieved a deep blue dress, reserved for special occasions, from my wardrobe and began to iron it, my thoughts, however, relentlessly returning to the enigmatic loan. At precisely 3 o'clock, I arrived at the Golden Lily, an ostentatious establishment with exorbitant prices and minuscule portions. Michael, my son, was already there with his wife, Sarah, and their teenage children, 15-year-old Liam and 14-year-old Maya. Michael, a successful customs broker, perpetually showcased his status with opulent watches and tailored suits. Mom, you've neglected your hair again, he remarked, instead of a greeting as I approached the table. That stray strand above your left ear. Hello, Michael, I said, ignoring his critique. Hello, Sarah. Hi, kids, I added as the teenagers mumbled incoherent responses, their faces glued to their phones. Sarah offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Where's Olivia? I inquired, settling into the offered chair. Detained at work, Michael replied. Some complications with the Miller family. You know how dedicated she is to her duties as a social worker. Olivia worked in social services, dealing with troubled households. She often declared her job was to rescue children from incompetent parents, a phrase that, at times, felt like a subtle jab at me. We had been seated for half an hour when Olivia finally arrived with her husband, David, and the birthday girl, Chloe. My granddaughter, a tall, brown-haired girl for her age, wore an expensive dress that made her resemble a miniature version of her mother. Grandma, you came. Chloe exclaimed, a hint of feigned surprise in her voice, as if my presence at her birthday celebration was an unexpected occurrence. Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything, I said, handing her the neatly wrapped box containing the bracelet. Happy birthday. Chloe accepted the gift without much enthusiasm, setting it aside without even bothering to unwrap it. Thanks, she mumbled, then immediately turned to her cousin, Maya, to show her something on her phone. Mom, what kind of fantastical story did you concoct about that loan? Olivia whispered, leaning close to my ear while the others were engrossed in the menu. I didn't concoct anything, I replied just as quietly. I have a letter from the bank. For heaven's sake, don't mention it in front of everyone. Olivia straightened up abruptly and declared loudly, Mom, would you prefer the salad or the soup? Lunch proceeded in a strained atmosphere. Michael and Olivia discussed various business matters, occasionally turning to me with condescending queries like, do you still recall Uncle Robert? Or, Mom, are you sure you're managing all right by yourself in that enormous house? My house was far from enormous, just 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen, but my children periodically suggested I should relocate to a smaller place. I suspected they simply yearned to sell the house and divide the proceeds. After lunch, as Chloe unwrapped her gifts, I noticed Olivia and Michael exchanging meaningful glances when my granddaughter carelessly discarded the silver bracelet. Must be terribly old-fashioned, Olivia muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I yearned to explain that it was a replica of my grandmother's cherished bracelet, worn her entire life, but I held my tongue. What was the point of articulating the intrinsic value of things to people who only understood monetary worth? When the party concluded, Olivia announced she would stop by my house in an hour. I took the bus home, a strange unease gnawing at me. Something in my daughter's demeanor felt off. At home, I reread the bank letter, studying every detail. The address of the property purchased with the loan money seemed eerily familiar. Lakeview Heights was a prestigious new lakeside development frequently featured in the local paper. Had someone stolen my identity to acquire a house there? While awaiting Olivia's arrival, I powered on the computer, a Christmas gift from Michael intended to keep me up to date, Mom. I wasn't particularly tech-savvy, but I possess basic computer skills. I opened a search engine and typed in the address, Lakeview Heights 27, Springfield. Photos of a lavish two-story house with panoramic windows and breathtaking lake views instantly filled the screen. The value of such a property could indeed hover around $1,200,000. I scrolled down, freezing as I saw information about a recent sale. The house had been sold in March of this year, the transaction date chillingly coinciding with the loan's processing date. I heard the familiar hum of a car pulling up and glanced out the window. Olivia's brand new SUV, a sleek, expensive model, a stark upgrade from her previous mid-size sedan, was parked outside. The moment she entered, her nervousness was palpable. She avoided eye contact, constantly adjusting her hair, a telltale sign of her agitation. "Where's that letter, Mother?" she demanded, still in her coat. I silently handed her the envelope. Olivia's eyes darted across the text and I watched her face drain of color. It's some sort of mistake," she stammered, her voice uncertain. "Or a scam. Someone used your information." "Precisely what I told you on the phone this morning," I replied, my voice steady. "And I intend to report it to the police." "No, no, 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 no," Olivia exclaimed, her words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "I'll handle it myself. I have a friend at Liberty Savings who can help me sort this out." "I also discovered something," I stated calmly. "The address in the letter is that new house at Lakeview Heights. It's quite stunning according to the internet pictures. 2 stories, lake views." Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes wide. You looked on the internet?" "Yes," I nodded. "And I also noticed you have a new car. I don't recall you mentioning plans to replace your old one." "Mom, what are you implying?" Olivia's voice hardened. "Nothing yet," I shrugged, feigning indifference. "Just an observation." Olivia clutched her purse nervously. "Look, I told you, I'll deal with that foolish letter. You have nothing to worry about." "I beg to differ," I countered. "Someone took out a loan in my name, used my documents, forged my signature, and if I don't repay that loan, I'm going to lose my house." "No one is taking your house away from you," Olivia burst out, her sudden fury startling me. "Damn it, Mom, why do you always have to make everything so complicated? I told you I'd resolve this." She was practically shouting, red blotches appearing on her neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. There was only one explanation for such a reaction. Olivia knew far more about the loan than she was admitting. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. This wasn't just a mistake or a scam. This was deliberate. This was her. "It's you," I said quietly, meeting her gaze directly. "You're behind this, aren't you?" My daughter averted her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I answered, "but I intend to find out." Olivia snatched the letter from my hands. "I'm taking this and please don't do anything foolish. Don't call the bank, don't go to the police. I'll handle it." She sprinted out, slamming the door with a reverberating thud. I stood alone in the center of my living room, feeling a strange, profound devastation. My own daughter had stolen my identity to acquire $1 million house, a house she hadn't even bothered to tell me about. Slowly, I walked back to my computer and reopened the page displaying the Lakeview Heights property. A luxurious structure with enormous windows and a sprawling terrace overlooking the glistening lake, a place I had never been invited to. In my inbox, I noticed an unread message from the bank. Opening it, I saw an electronic copy of the loan agreement, sent to my address upon the completion of the transaction. In the borrower's signature column was a crude forgery of my signature, so poorly executed it was baffling how the bank could have possibly missed it. I leaned back in my chair, a cold, simmering rage beginning to coalesce within me. For years, my children had treated me like a burden, tolerating my presence at family gatherings with barely concealed irritation, speaking to me as if I were less. And now Olivia had crossed an unforgivable line. She hadn't merely stolen my data. She had jeopardized the only things I had left. My home, my independence, my dignity. I pulled my old leather-bound notebook from my desk drawer, flipping through its pages, searching for the right number. I needed a lawyer, but not the type Michael would recommend. I needed someone who would stand firmly on my side against my own children. Attorney Victoria Vance's office was located in a charming, older brick building in Springfield's bustling business district. I found her contact details in the city directory, where she modestly advertised herself as a specialist in elder law defense in financial abuse, precisely what I required. I called first thing the following morning, and to my surprise, her secretary scheduled an appointment for the very same day at 2:30 p.m. Evidently, the attorney's calendar wasn't excessively packed. Stepping off the bus, I paused outside the entrance, gathering my resolve. The word lawyer had always sounded inherently intimidating. I had only consulted one twice in my entire life, once when Arthur and I purchased our home, and again when we drafted his will. In both instances, they were Arthur's acquaintances, and he handled all the negotiations himself. I can handle this, I whispered to myself, and pushed open the heavy wooden door. The reception area was small but inviting, a young woman with a chic bob and thick-rimmed glasses seated behind the desk. "Ms. Reed," she inquired as she saw me. "Ms. Vance is expecting you. Please go right in." The attorney's office was unexpectedly bright and cheerful. Instead of a rigid, formal interior, I saw a vibrant room filled with large windows and an abundance of potted plants. Behind a wide, polished desk sat a woman in her 60s, with closely cropped gray hair and a striking sapphire blue suit. "Hello, Ms. Reed," she said, rising and extending her hand. "Victoria Vance. Please have a seat." Her handshake was firm, confident, like someone accustomed to taking charge. I settled into the chair she offered. "Tell me what brings you to me?" Victoria asked, pulling out a notepad. I took a deep breath and began, starting with the bewildering letter from the bank. I recounted the call, Olivia's perplexing reaction, how I had discovered the house photos online, and our chilling last conversation. My voice was shaky, but I strove to remain concise, avoiding emotional outbursts. Victoria listened intently, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen thoughtfully on the table. "What you've described, Ms. Reed, is a textbook case of identity theft, tragically exacerbated by the fact that the perpetrator is a family member. Regrettably, it's not uncommon, particularly among the elderly. Do you truly believe my daughter did this?" I asked, still clinging to a sliver of hope for an alternative explanation. "What do you believe?" Victoria countered, her gaze unwavering. I sighed. I think I do. The new car, her nervousness when discussing the loan, her attempts to silence me. But I find it incredibly difficult to accept that Olivia, my Olivia, could be capable of such a crime. "People change, Ms. Reed," Victoria said softly, "and not always for the better. Tell me, has your daughter previously exhibited what one might call a disregard for your personal or financial autonomy?" I pondered this. There have been many instances over the years where my children have attempted to dictate my decisions, especially those concerning money. After Arthur passed, Michael insisted I grant him power of attorney to manage my accounts. I refused. He claimed it would be safer, but I stood my ground. It caused quite a scene. He even threatened to have me declared incompetent if I continued to be stubborn. "And your property? Was there constant talk of selling your house?" I nodded. "Especially in the last 2 years. Olivia claims it's too large for me alone, that I can't possibly keep up with it. And Michael is constantly calculating how much I could get for selling it. They've even found me a lovely little apartment in a retirement community." Victoria made a note in her notebook. "Do you have a will? Who inherits your estate?" "Olivia and Michael equally," I said. "That's what Arthur and I decided years ago. Although I must admit, I've been considering revising it lately. Perhaps leaving the funds to my grandchildren instead of my children." "I see," Victoria nodded. "Now let's return to our immediate concern. We have a couple of options. The first is to file a police report for fraud. That's the most drastic course of action, and it could lead to criminal prosecution of your daughter." I flinched at her words. Olivia, a criminal? My daughter in jail? It seemed utterly absurd. "Are there other options?" I asked quietly. "The second option," Victoria continued, "is a civil lawsuit. We could sue your daughter and seek to have the loan agreement declared void as fraudulent. It's less drastic than a criminal case, but it would still result in a public scandal." "And the third option?" I nervously clutched my purse. "Attempt to resolve the matter amicably." Victoria shrugged. "I could draft a letter on your behalf, outlining the facts and demanding that your daughter either assume the loan herself or repay it immediately. The implicit threat of criminal prosecution might compel her to act." I remained silent, trying to absorb the information. All the options felt abhorrent, but even more horrifying was the thought of my own daughter placing me in this untenable position. What would happen if I simply did nothing? I finally asked, "If I just ignored this loan?" Victoria shook her head. "Then the bank would initiate foreclosure proceedings. First, they'll levy late fees, then they'll turn it over to debt collectors. Eventually, they could sue you and obtain the right to enforce foreclosure, including the seizure of your property. That is, your house. But that's not fair, I exclaimed. I didn't sign anything. Justice and the law aren't always synonymous, Ms. Reed, Victoria said softly. To prove you didn't take out the loan, we'd have to prove fraud. And that means identifying the fraudster. I closed my eyes, a lump forming in my throat. For as long as I could remember, Olivia had been a challenging child, stubborn, sharp, ambitious, with a calculating streak beyond her years. She rarely made friends at school, yet she always achieved the highest grades. She often clashed with her brother, but she possessed an uncanny ability to manipulate him. Arthur believed she would make an exceptional lawyer or politician. Our girl has a will of steel, he'd often say with a proud twinkle in his eye. But there was something else about Olivia. Beneath the veneer of self-assurance lurked a desperate hunger for validation, for confirmation of her worth. I observed it in the smallest things, how she boasted about new possessions, her desperate need to impress others, how painfully she reacted to any criticism. I remembered when she was 15. She came home in tears because she hadn't secured the lead role in the school play. That part was mine, she had screamed, locking herself in her room. The very next day, we learned that the girl who had secured the role had suffered an accident. Someone had pushed her down the stairs, breaking her arm. Olivia got the part. Arthur and I never discussed the incident, but I could see the quiet worry in his eyes. As an adult, Olivia hadn't fundamentally changed. She didn't marry David for love, but because he hailed from a well-connected, respectable family. She chose a career in social services not out of profound compassion for troubled families, but because it afforded her a degree of power over others. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me, that she was perpetually envious of those who resided in exclusive neighborhoods, drove luxury vehicles, and vacationed in exotic locales. Ms. Reed. Victoria's voice gently brought me back to the present. Do you need some time to contemplate your options? Yes, I suppose I do, I nodded. It's too monumental a decision to make immediately. I understand, Victoria said, handing me a business card. Call me when you've reached a decision on how to proceed. But don't delay too long. Time is not on our side. I rose to leave but paused at the doorway. Ms. Vance, what would you do if you were in my position? Victoria hesitated. I cannot offer such personal advice, Ms. Reed. Each individual must decide for themselves what holds greater importance, familial bonds or justice. And if there is no choice? I asked quietly. If familial bonds are already fractured, then there is only justice, Victoria replied simply, and self-respect. I left the office with a heavy heart. A fine drizzle had begun, and I unfurled the umbrella I always carried, an old habit my children often mocked. Grandma, the weatherman. Chloe called me. Mom, there are weather apps now. Walking slowly towards the bus stop, Victoria's words echoed in my mind. Familial bonds versus justice. But weren't true familial bonds predicated on mutual respect? Could a genuine family exist where some members actively deceived and exploited others? The bus was late, and I found a seat on a nearby bench. People hurried past, shielding themselves from the rain, indifferent to the troubles of others. My mind reeled with memories. Here was Olivia, a little girl with pigtails, running towards me, a drawing clutched in her hand. Mommy, look. It's you. In the drawing, the angular figure of a woman with a wide, joyous smile. Here she was, a teenager, rolling her eyes as I tried to embrace her in front of her school. Mom, you're embarrassing me. Here she was, a college graduate, proudly displaying her diploma, and I could see in her eyes, look, I've accomplished everything on my own. Although that wasn't true, Arthur and I had worked double shifts to fund her education. And then everything had changed. After Chloe was born, Olivia became even more distant. Her infrequent visits became mere formalities, her conversations a litany of my perceived shortcomings. Mom, you should really monitor your appearance. Mom, your house looks so dated. Mom, you talk about the past far too much. When Arthur died, Olivia had orchestrated the entire funeral, never once consulting my wishes. She selected the casket, the flowers, even a dress for me. You're in no state to make decisions right now, Mom, she had declared, her tone brooking no argument. And after the funeral, she and Michael had begun dividing Arthur's possessions as if I were invisible. His prized stamp collection, meticulously amassed his entire life, Michael had simply taken for himself without even asking. "It'll just gather dust at your place, Mom." I had become a burden to them, a problem to be solved, an aging woman from whom only trouble could be expected. They had ceased to see me as a person. Perhaps they never truly had. The bus arrived and I climbed the steps, fumbling with my wet umbrella. A kind young woman offered me her seat, and I nodded gratefully, a small gesture of courtesy from a stranger, more than I had received from my own children in recent years. At home, the first thing I did was retrieve my phone and dial the number of the only person I felt I could truly trust. Grace Watson, a dear friend from my days at the post office. Grace was 5 years my senior, yet she possessed more vitality than people half her age. When she was widowed, almost concurrently with me, she didn't succumb to despair but embraced volunteer work at an animal shelter and even embarked on learning Spanish, purely for intellectual stimulation. "Evelyn," she answered on the third ring. "Is something wrong? You rarely call in the middle of the day." I succinctly recounted the loan predicament and my visit to the attorney. "What a snake!" Grace exclaimed when I finished. "After everything you and Arthur did for her, Evelyn. You absolutely must sue her. No, the police. Make her answer for this to the full extent of the law." "I don't know, Grace," I sighed. "She's my daughter. How can I send her to jail? How can she steal from her own mother?" Grace countered. "Evelyn, listen to me. I know you love your children. All mothers love their children, even the most ungrateful ones. But sometimes love means allowing them to face the consequences of their actions. If Olivia gets away with this scheme, what will she pull next time?" Her words resonated, but I still struggled with the concept of filing a criminal complaint against my own flesh and blood. "I'll think about it," I said. "I need some time." "Just not too much," Grace warned. "Those bankers won't wait forever. And remember, I'm on your side, whatever you decide." After speaking with Grace, I felt a slight sense of calm. At least one person in the world supported me unconditionally. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the rain intensify into a torrential downpour. The drops drummed rhythmically on the glass, creating a surprisingly soothing sound. My thoughts slowly began to clarify. What would Arthur say if he were in this situation? My husband was a kind man, but he held firm principles. "Justice must be done," he often said, "and you cannot permit others to wipe their feet all over you, even if those others are your own family." Perhaps I had allowed my children to disrespect me for too long. Perhaps my gentleness and accommodating nature had inadvertently led Olivia to take this audacious step. She knew I would rather remain silent than create a scene. But not this time. No more being the doormat that people wipe their feet on. No more being the invisible one whose opinion can be ignored. No more being the out-of-touch old mom who is tolerated out of polite obligation. I picked up the phone and dialed Victoria Vance's number. "Ms. Reed?" she answered, a note of surprise in her voice. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I've made up my mind," I stated firmly. "I want to file a lawsuit against my daughter and a police report for fraud." "Are you certain?" I could detect a hint of doubt in Victoria's voice. "It's a significant step." "I'm absolutely certain," I replied. "If I back down now, I'll never respect myself again. And my children will never respect me again." "All right," Victoria said after a pause. "Return tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We'll prepare the necessary paperwork." As I hung up, a strange sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, I had made a decision with my best interests at heart, not what my children would say or do. It was frightening yet liberating all at once. The phone rang again. Michael's name flashed across the screen. "Mom, have you lost your mind?" he began, without a greeting. "Olivia just called me, hysterical. She said you're threatening to sue her over some bank letter." "It wasn't nothing, Michael," I said calmly. "Your sister took out a loan in my name without my knowledge. That's called fraud." "Oh, come on, Mom," my son scoffed. "What's the big deal?" "So she took out a loan. She's paying it off. What do you care?" "The difference is that it's illegal," I said. "And if she stops paying, I'm the one who's in trouble." "She's not going to stop paying." Michael's voice rose. "Damn it, Mom, have you always been such a pain in the neck? Always making everything so complicated?" "Did you know?" I asked him directly. "Did you know Olivia was using my documents?" Michael hesitated for a second. I didn't go into detail. She said you had an agreement." "We had no agreement." I cut him off. "She stole my data, and if you knew about it and didn't stop her, then you're an accessory." "An accessory?" Michael laughed, but it was a nervous, hollow sound. Mom, you've been watching too many crime shows. No one considers this a crime. It's just a family arrangement. No, Michael, it is a crime, I said firmly. And I intend to seek justice. For goodness sake, Mom. There was impatience in my son's voice. What justice? You want to put your own daughter in jail? Disgrace the entire family? What are you thinking? I'm thinking that my children believe I am so insignificant that they don't even perceive a problem with using my name for their shenanigans, I replied. I'm thinking about the fact that both of you have treated me like a burden for years. I think it's time for that to stop. Mom, listen, Michael's voice became saccharinely persuasive. Let me come over to your place and we can discuss this. It's just a misunderstanding. Olivia didn't mean any harm. She just wanted a better life for her family. At my expense, I finished for him. Don't be so dramatic, Michael. No one's going to leave you with debt. Olivia's paying her loan and she'll continue paying it. What if she loses her job? Get sick? Decides she doesn't want to pay anymore? What then? That won't happen. Michael said confidently. Mom, you have to trust your children. No, Michael, I replied quietly. It was you who should have respected your mother. But you didn't. And now it's time to pay the price. I hung up without waiting for his response. My hands trembled, but I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a helpless old woman, but like a person capable of defending herself. Of course, Michael and Olivia would pressure me, use every tactic to make me back down. They'd threaten, flatter, manipulate. They might even try to portray me as a senile, out-of-control old woman. But now I had Victoria Vance, a lawyer who believed me and was willing to fight for my rights. I had Grace, a friend who supported me unconditionally. And I had my unwavering resolve not to let anyone else, not even my own children, trample on my dignity. The rain outside intensified, but I felt as though my life was finally beginning to clear. I picked up the phone and dialed Victoria's number again. Ms. Vance, I was wondering if we win the case, what happens to the house Olivia bought with the loan money? The bank will likely seize it to pay off the loan, Victoria replied. And if your daughter is found guilty of fraud, she could face a fine and possibly probation. I understand, I said. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up pondering. Olivia would lose her dream home. She'd probably acquire a criminal record. She'd likely harbor a grudge against me for the rest of her life. Michael would probably side with his sister. I could lose not only my children but my grandchildren. A steep price to pay for justice. But the price for silence was even higher. The loss of self-respect, the crushing feeling that I had betrayed myself by allowing my children to deceive me with impunity. No, I couldn't back down. This was my last chance to demonstrate to my children that I was not a waste of space, not a senile old woman, but a human being with rights and dignity. And if I had to engage in conflict with my own family to achieve that, then so be it. I stared at the rain-streaked window, contemplating the fact that tomorrow, a new chapter of my life would begin, a chapter in which I would be the protagonist, not a mere supporting character in my children's lives. The following morning was overcast, but the rain had ceased. I awoke early before 7 and lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts swirled around my impending meeting with Victoria and what lay ahead. Doubts began to gnaw at my soul once more. Was I truly doing the right thing? Was suing my own daughter too drastic a step? The phone on my bedside table rang. I glanced at the screen. Olivia. My finger hovered over the answer button, but I decided against picking up. Whatever she said now wouldn't alter my decision, it would only drain the energy I barely possessed. At 9:30 I was already outside Victoria's office. The receptionist nodded understandingly when she saw me, ushering me into the office without an announcement. Victoria was seated at her desk, reviewing papers. Good morning, Ms. Reed, she said, gesturing to a chair. I see you're early. That's good, we'll have more time. I sat down, clutching my purse nervously. Ms. Vance, I was wondering, do we truly need to file a police report? Wouldn't a civil suit suffice? Victoria looked at me carefully. Are you having second thoughts? Yes, I admitted honestly. I was up all night thinking about it. I think a criminal case is too definitive. There's no turning back after that. Do you want there to be a way back? Victoria asked gently. After what your daughter did? I sighed. I don't know. What she did was awful, but she's still my child. Look, Victoria said, setting her papers aside and leaning across the table towards me. Let's do this. We'll gather all the evidence first, and then we'll decide which path to take. We could start with a civil suit and leave the question of criminal prosecution open. How does that sound? Yes, that would be better, I agreed with profound relief. Then let's get started. Victoria pulled out a blank notebook. We need to construct a chronology of events and collect documents confirming the fraud. Let's start at the beginning. When did you first learn about the loan? We spent the next 2 hours meticulously reconstructing the events. I recounted everything: the bank letter, the conversation with the operator, Olivia and Michael's peculiar reactions, my daughter's new car, and the house on Lakeview Heights. So, Victoria summarized, the loan was processed on March 14th. Were you anywhere in particular that day? Perhaps traveling or at a doctor's appointment? We need to prove that you couldn't have physically signed the documents at the bank. I thought hard, straining to recall that specific day. March 14th. Yes, I remember. I had a routine checkup at St. Jude's Clinic that day. It occupied almost the entire day, from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. First, blood tests, then a cardiologist consultation, then some other procedures. It was a Tuesday, I remember precisely, because I was anxious about the results. Excellent, Victoria noted. We'll request your medical records from the clinic to confirm your presence there at the exact time the loan agreement was allegedly signed. It's crucial evidence. Will they provide us with that information? At the request of counsel in preparation for trial, yes, Victoria assured me. Anything else? Oh yes. We need samples of your authentic signature to compare it to the one on the loan agreement. Do you have any documents with your signature on you? I retrieved my passport and driver's license from my purse. Just these. The rest are at home. That's sufficient for starters, Victoria nodded. I'll make copies. Later, we'll require an official handwriting examination, but that's for the trial itself. She left the office with my documents, and I remained seated, observing the numerous plants on the windowsill. Most were succulents, small, unpretentious, yet remarkably resilient. In some ways, they reminded me of myself. Victoria returned with my papers and a glass of water for me. Here, drink this. We have a lot of work ahead. I gratefully accepted the water. What's next? Next, we need to obtain a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. I've already drafted the request, Victoria said, showing me a document on official letterhead. You'll need to sign it. We'll also require information on all the loan payments, who made them and when. This will help prove you had no involvement in the loan. I signed the request, feeling a strange sense of relief that I wasn't alone in navigating this convoluted mess. Now about the house on Lakeview Heights, Victoria continued. You mentioned finding information about it online, but we need official real estate records. Who is it registered to? Who is listed as the buyer on the purchase agreement? I'll file a request, but it will take some time. How long? I asked. 5 to 7 days. Bureaucracy, Victoria shrugged. But there's a way to expedite things. I know a reliable realtor who has direct access to the real estate database. He can provide us with preliminary information informally. I'll contact him today. What about the bank? I inquired. How could they have granted such a substantial loan without thorough verification? That's an excellent question, Victoria nodded. Banks are obligated to conduct stringent identity checks on borrowers. But if the scammer possessed all your documents, including your social security number and tax returns, plus a meticulously forged signature, and especially if the application was submitted by someone you know well, someone who could answer personal questions about you, banks can make mistakes too, or turn a blind eye if it's a lucrative deal. And that's possible? I asked. Indeed, Victoria agreed. In any case, we will certainly ascertain if there were any irregularities in the loan process. The next few days passed in anxious anticipation. Victoria was consumed with gathering evidence, and I attempted to live a normal life, though it proved challenging. My children didn't call, neither Olivia nor Michael. Apparently, they decided to give me time to come to my senses. On the 4th day, Victoria called and asked me to come to her office. I have some news, she said as I entered. A realtor I know provided information on the house at Lakeview Heights. Guess who it's registered to? Olivia. I guessed. Not exactly, Victoria said, handing me a printout. It's registered to Caldwell Holdings LLC. It's a limited liability company established by your son-in-law, David Caldwell, 2 months ago, shortly before he purchased the house. I frowned. Why go to all that trouble? Why not register the house directly to themselves? To conceal the true owner, Victoria explained. It's a common practice when people want to hide something. In this case, I believe your daughter and her husband wanted to obscure the connection between the loan in your name and the house purchase. If the house was directly deeded to Olivia, it would be far too obvious where the money originated. But they live in the house, right? How do they explain that? Officially, they rent the house from Caldwell Holdings, at least, that's what my source indicated. The rent is a mere $1,000 a month, which is significantly below market value for a property of this caliber. I shook my head, astonished by my daughter's cunning. I hadn't realized she was capable of such intricate machinations. That's not all, Victoria continued. I obtained a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. Take a look at the signature. She held it out to me. There was a scrawled signature in the borrower's column that bore only a faint resemblance to my own. It doesn't even look like mine. I exclaimed. How could the bank have accepted such an obvious forgery? Because someone at the bank assisted your daughter, Victoria said, tapping her finger on the document. Note the name of the loan officer who processed the transaction, Daniel Preston. Does that name ring a bell? I hesitated. No, I don't recall it. What about your daughter? I don't know. Wait a minute. I remembered a snippet of conversation at Chloe's birthday party. Michael had mentioned someone named Daniel, someone Olivia had attended college with. I think they dated for a while, but I'm not certain if it's the same Daniel. It's worth investigating, Victoria noted. If the loan officer knew your daughter personally, that would explain how she managed to bypass the standard checks. Victoria pulled out another document. Here's the loan statement. 2 payments have already been made. Guess by whom? Olivia. No. Caldwell Holdings. The money is originating from a corporate account, another attempt to hide the connection. I leaned back, trying to process the deluge of information. My daughter hadn't merely used my documents. She had constructed an elaborate scheme to cover her tracks. What about Michael? I asked. Did you ascertain his role in all of this? There's no direct evidence of his involvement, Victoria replied, but judging by his reaction as described by you, he was definitely aware of his sister's machinations. The question is whether he was actively assisting or merely turning a blind eye. At that moment, Victoria's cell phone rang. She apologized and answered it. The conversation was brief, but afterwards the lawyer's face lit up. Excellent news. St. Jude's Clinic has confirmed that on March 14th, you were indeed present there from 8:30 in the morning until 3:45 in the afternoon. They've maintained meticulous records, including the precise time of each procedure and consultation. And the loan agreement, according to the bank stamp, was signed at 11:20 a.m. the very same day. So I couldn't physically have been at the bank at that time, I said. Exactly, Victoria nodded. It's an airtight alibi. Now we possess all the evidence we require for the lawsuit, the forged signature, your irrefutable alibi for the time of contract signing, the questionable role of the loan officer, and the blatant scheme to conceal the true purpose of the loan. I remained silent, absorbing the information. On one hand, I felt a sense of relief that irrefutable evidence had been amassed. On the other, I felt a profound depression at the realization of how meticulously Olivia had orchestrated the entire affair. This wasn't an impulsive act or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, well-planned fraud against her own mother. Are you all right? Victoria asked, noticing my distressed state. Not really, I answered honestly. I can't believe that my daughter, that she could do this to me. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, Victoria said, especially when it involves elderly parents. Many adult children begin to perceive them not as full human beings, but as property, or an inconvenience, or merely a source of potential inheritance. It's a sad reality. I nodded, tears welling in my throat. You know, when Arthur passed, I thought nothing worse could ever happen in my life. But this hurts even more. Victoria silently handed me a box of tissues. I blotted my eyes, trying to compose myself. I'm sorry. I'm not usually this emotional. Don't apologize, Victoria said softly. You have every right to feel whatever you want in a situation like this. We sat in silence for a while, then Victoria asked, what do you wish to do next? We have sufficient evidence for a civil suit. If we prevail, the bank will cancel the loan agreement, and you won't be obligated to repay the loan. However, the house will likely be confiscated because it was acquired with illegally obtained funds. And the criminal case? I asked quietly. For that, you would need to file a report with the police, Victoria replied. They will conduct their investigation, and if they find enough evidence, the case will be referred to the prosecutor's office. If your daughter is found guilty, she could face a fine and possibly probation. Actual jail time is rare in these cases, especially if it's a first offense. I pondered. Did I want my daughter to have a criminal record? No. But did I want her to grasp the gravity of her actions? Definitely. Could we begin with the civil suit? I asked. Could we leave the criminal case open? I want to observe Olivia's reaction. Perhaps she'll come to her senses, admit her guilt. Of course, Victoria agreed. We can take it one step at a time. First, we'll file a civil suit, and then, depending on how things develop, we'll decide whether to involve the police. Thank you, I said, relieved. When can we file the suit? I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week, Victoria said. We'll file the suit in the Springfield District Court. After that, your daughter will receive official notice of the trial. It typically takes about a month to prepare for the first hearing. A whole month. I was surprised. That long? Those are the court rules, Victoria shrugged. But the good news is that I'll be filing a motion for interim measures. If the judge grants it, the bank will suspend all claims on the loan until the trial is concluded, so you won't have to worry about making payments during that period. When I left Victoria's office, the sun was shining outside, a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. I felt utterly depleted, as if I had endured a prolonged illness. On my way home, I stopped at the small cafe where I occasionally met Grace. I craved to be among people, to listen to ordinary conversations, to distract myself from my burdensome thoughts. I ordered tea and sat observing the patrons. At the next table, a young woman was having lunch with her elderly mother. They were talking animatedly about something, laughing. The daughter was gently adjusting her mother's scarf, listening with genuine interest. It was a commonplace scene that, before, would have evoked no particular emotion in me. But now I gazed at them with a pang of profound longing. Why had things gone so terribly wrong between Olivia and me? When had we lost the closeness that should exist between a mother and daughter? Perhaps I had been a flawed mother, not providing enough attention, demanding too much, or conversely, too little. No. I had always striven to be a good mother. Arthur and I had worked tirelessly to provide our children with everything they needed. I read them stories, helped with homework, supported their hobbies. Of course, I made mistakes all parents do. But I never betrayed my children. Never lied to them. Never took advantage of them. Olivia had betrayed me, used me, lied to me, and she didn't even perceive it as a significant transgression, judging by her reaction. Perhaps it wasn't me. Perhaps it was her. Her character. Her choices. Her sense of morality. And as painful as it was to admit, I couldn't be held responsible for her decisions. When I arrived home, I found 3 messages from Olivia on my answering machine. The first demanded I call her back immediately. In the second, she threatened dire consequences if I didn't abandon this lawyer nonsense. In the third, her tone shifted to pleading. Mom, please talk. I'll explain everything. Don't do this, please. I didn't return the call. What else could she possibly say? What excuses could she offer? I took out a loan in your name because I desired a better house. I forged your signature because I knew you'd say no. I concealed everything from you because I didn't believe it was necessary to inform you. No explanation could alter what had transpired. My daughter had betrayed my trust, broken the law, and jeopardized my financial security. And worst of all, she didn't even recognize the profound wrong in it. I went to bed early, but sleep eluded me for a long time, the events of the past few days replaying endlessly in my mind. All the evidence pointed to Olivia acting deliberately and with calculated intent. She hadn't merely used my name. She had constructed an elaborate scheme to cover her tracks. She registered the house with a shell company. She exploited her bank contacts to bypass the checks. It wasn't an impulsive mistake, it was a carefully planned fraud. And Michael knew about it. He may not have been directly involved, but he certainly knew and approved of his sister's actions. His reaction to my call left no room for doubt. My own children had conspired against me. They didn't view me as a person with feelings and rights, but as an obstacle and inconvenience, a means to their own ends. How could I have been so blind? How could I have failed to see that my children's attitude towards me had long since crossed the line into mere disrespect? All my life, I had strived to be a good mother, supporting them, helping them, making concessions. And as a result, they had concluded they could exploit me however they pleased. Well, it was time to demonstrate their error. I am not a helpless old woman to be manipulated. I am a person who knows how to stand up for herself. I am a mother who loved her children, but will not allow them to trample on my dignity. Yes, I am in pain. Yes, I feel betrayed. But that pain doesn't break me. On the contrary, it imbues me with strength. Strength to fight for justice. Strength to show my children that their actions have consequences. Strength to finally respect myself. I called Victoria this morning and informed her I was ready to proceed with the lawsuit as soon as possible. It was time for decisive action. 2 weeks had passed since the lawsuit was filed. Victoria had cautioned me that Olivia would receive official notice of the lawsuit within the next few days. After that, we could anticipate a fresh wave of calls and attempts to influence me, so I tried to mentally brace myself for the impending storm. However, contrary to expectations, the phone remained silent. Neither Olivia nor Michael attempted to contact me. I even began to worry, wondering if something had befallen my children, but then I decided they were simply ignoring me, hoping I would come to my senses and withdraw the lawsuit. Thursday morning, I received a call from Grace. Her voice was rapid and excited. "Evelyn, are you sitting down? You better sit down." "What's wrong?" I asked, sinking into the chair by the phone. "My granddaughter, Ava, you remember her, don't you? She works part-time at the Silver Spoon Catering Company," Grace began. "So she just called me and told me that their firm got the order to cater Olivia's party. The housewarming party. It's this Saturday at Lakeview Heights." I was silent, processing the information. Olivia was throwing a housewarming party in a house bought with a loan fraudulently taken out in my name. And of course, she hadn't invited me. "Evelyn? Are you there?" Grace's voice brought me back to reality. "Yes, I'm here," I answered. "I'm just, contemplating what I've heard." "That's just outrageous," Grace exclaimed. "Having a housewarming party when there's a lawsuit pending and not even inviting her own mother. I've always said your Olivia was a real piece of work, but this is beyond the pale." "How many guests is she expecting?" I asked, surprised at my own calmness. "Ava says the reservation is for 40 people. Cocktails, appetizers, champagne. It's all top shelf. The party starts at 6 p.m. I envisioned Olivia leading guests through her luxurious new home, accepting congratulations, extolling the designer renovations and lake views, not a single word uttered about how she had managed to acquire the property. "Thank you for informing me, Grace," I said. "It's important information. What are you going to do?" Her voice sounded curious. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm sure I'll devise something." After speaking with Grace, I dialed Victoria's number. Fortunately, she was in and answered immediately. "Ms. Reed, I was just about to call you," she said. "The bailiffs are having trouble serving the notice on your daughter. She won't answer the door or her phone." "I think I know when and where to find her for certain," I said, and proceeded to tell her about the upcoming party. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you suggesting that we serve her with a subpoena right at the housewarming party?" Victoria asked. "That's unconventional. Are there any legal obstacles?" I asked. "No, legally there are no impediments," Victoria replied. "The bailiff has the right to serve the documents wherever the defendant is. But it could cause quite a scandal." "Let it," I said firmly. "My daughter is hosting a party in a house she purchased with illegally obtained money, and she doesn't even bother to invite me, despite the loan being in my name. I think a little scandal is the least she deserves." "All right, I'll contact the bailiff," Victoria agreed after a moment's thought. "But are you certain you want to be there in person? Wouldn't it be better to simply let the bailiff do the job himself?" I wondered. Indeed, why would I want to be there? To witness the shock on my daughter's face? To savor her humiliation? No, that wasn't it. I wanted Olivia to realize that I wasn't a helpless old woman to be used and forgotten. I am a person who can stand up for herself. "Yes, I want to be there," I said firmly. Not out of revenge, but to demonstrate to my daughter that I haven't given up and I won't. "I understand," Victoria's voice was respectful. "In that case, I'll arrange with the bailiff to meet you Saturday night near your daughter's house. Say 5:30. "That's fine," I agreed. "Let me know the exact location closer to the date." After speaking with Victoria, I felt a strange sense of calm. The decision had been made, and now all I had to do was follow the plan. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of the situation rather than adrift. The remainder of the week passed in anxious anticipation. I tried to occupy myself with everyday tasks, cleaning, reading, tending to my garden. But my thoughts relentlessly returned to Saturday. Was I doing the right thing? Was it too cruel to disrupt my daughter's celebration? But each time the doubts began to gnaw at me, I recalled Olivia's actions and my resolve solidified. Saturday morning, I awoke early. The day was clear and warm, perfect weather for a lakeside gathering. I stood before my closet for a long time, deliberating what to wear. In the end, I chose a dark blue dress with a crisp white collar, austere, yet elegant. I styled my hair and applied light makeup. Looking in the mirror, I saw not a woman broken by grief, but a person imbued with dignity and fortitude. At 5 o'clock, I called a cab. Usually I relied on public transportation, but today was a special occasion. Besides, I wasn't certain how I would return home, and I didn't wish to be dependent on bus schedules. Victoria had sent me the address of a cafe near Lakeview Heights, where we were to rendezvous with the bailiff. When the cab pulled up to the cafe, I saw Victoria seated at a table on the outdoor veranda. Next to her was a tall, middle-aged man in a smart suit. "Miss Reed," Victoria stood when she saw me. "I'd like you to meet Mr. Jonathan Hayes, the bailiff." Mr. Hayes nodded politely. "Good evening, ma'am. Ms. Vance has explained the situation to me. I will serve notice of the lawsuit on Ms. Caldwell in accordance with all regulations." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand, noting his firm grip. "Here's the plan of action," Victoria said. "Mr. Hayes will pose as a catering employee to get into the house. Once he locates your daughter, he will hand her the papers. You can go in with him or wait outside and come in later, whichever is more convenient for you." I pondered. Should I appear with the bailiff or wait until the documents were served and then enter? Which would make a stronger impression? I think it would be better if I went in with Mr. Hayes, I decided. Olivia should know immediately that this is no accident or coincidence. "Whatever you say," Victoria nodded. "Just remember, your goal is not to instigate a scandal, but to demonstrate that you are serious and will not capitulate. Try to maintain your dignity, no matter what transpires." "I'll try," I promised, though I trembled inwardly. We decided to walk. It was merely a 10-minute stroll from the cafe to Olivia's house. Along the way, Victoria reiterated the legal ramifications of the situation. "Once the notice is served, your daughter will be officially considered to have been notified of the lawsuit. She will have 21 days to file an answer with the court. If she fails to do so, the court may issue a judgment in your favor in her absence." I nodded, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I imagined walking into a house where I had never been truly welcomed before. I would see my daughter's face when she realized her machinations had been exposed. What would she say? How would she react? And how would I feel about it? Lakeview Heights was precisely as I had imagined. A row of opulent lakeside homes with impeccably manicured lawns and gleaming luxury cars in the driveways. Number 27 stood out even against this backdrop. A grand two-story house with panoramic windows and a sweeping terrace overlooking the lake. Several cars were already parked outside, and muffled music and laughter drifted from the open windows. "The party's in full swing," Mr. Hayes said, adjusting his tie. "Perfect timing." We walked to the front door. I could feel my heart thumping against my ribs, but I tried to remain composed. Mr. Hayes pressed the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door was opened by a young woman in a catering uniform. "Are you from the Silver Spoon?" she asked. "We were expecting additional staff." "That's right," Mr. Hayes nodded confidently. "I was sent to assist with the service, and this lady is the quality inspector. We need to speak with the lady of the house." "Certainly, come right in." The girl led us inside. "Miss Caldwell is in the living room with her guests." We entered a spacious hall with a gleaming marble floor and mirrored walls. Vases overflowing with flowers were everywhere, and a dazzling crystal chandelier, which must have cost a fortune, hung from the ceiling. I held my breath. This was what the money from the fraudulent loan in my name had been used for. Mr. Hayes strode confidently towards the source of the voices. I followed him, trying not to betray my agitation. We entered an enormous living room with panoramic windows overlooking the lake. The room was filled with elegantly dressed people, champagne flutes in hand. In the center of the group stood Olivia, resplendent in an elegant beige dress, speaking animatedly. When she noticed an unfamiliar man in a suit, she stopped mid-sentence. When her eyes fell on me, her face solidified with shock. "Mom," she said incredulously. How did you get here?" A sudden silence descended upon the room. All eyes were on me and Mr. Hayes, who stepped forward. "Ms. Olivia Caldwell?" he asked in an official tone. "Yes," my daughter answered, confused. "And who are you?" "I am Jonathan Hayes, the bailiff." He produced some papers from his inner jacket pocket. "I am hereby serving you with notice of a lawsuit filed by Evelyn Reed for fraud and forgery." Olivia's face went utterly pale. She stood motionless, staring at the papers extended towards her. "What the hell is this?" exclaimed David, Olivia's husband, stepping forward. "What kind of lawsuit?" "The suit concerns a $1,200,000 mortgage loan illegally secured in Ms. Reed's name," Mr. Hayes explained calmly. "Miss Caldwell, please accept the documents." Olivia mechanically took the papers, her eyes still fixed on me in disbelief. "Mom, are you insane?" she hissed, her voice barely audible. "Making such a spectacle of yourself in front of everyone." "No, Olivia, you're insane," I said quietly but firmly. "Taking out a loan in my name without my knowledge, forging my signature, buying a house with money that doesn't belong to you." The room became so silent, you could practically hear the ticking of a clock on the wall. The guests looked around in confusion. Some even began discreetly edging towards the exit. "Ms. Reed," Mr. Hayes leaned slightly towards me. "My mission is accomplished. I'm good to go, unless you have further instructions." "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," I nodded. "You're free to go." The bailiff bowed politely and headed for the exit. An awkward silence hung in the living room. Olivia stood, clutching the documents she had received, seemingly unsure of her next move. "Let's keep the party going, everyone." David attempted to lighten the mood. "Miss," he said to a catering girl, "bring more champagne, while my mother-in-law and I have a quick chat in the study." He took a step towards me, intending to take my arm, but I stepped back. "No, David," I said. "No talking in the study. Everything I have to say, I've already stated in court. Now, I wish to see the house I bought with the loan money in my name. I have that right, don't I?" "Mom, stop it right now." Olivia had finally regained her voice. "You're humiliating us in front of everyone." "No, Olivia, you're humiliating yourself by your actions," I said calmly. "I'm only speaking the truth." "What truth?" Michael, whom I hadn't noticed among the guests, interjected. "What are you fabricating now, Mother?" "I'm not fabricating anything, Michael." I turned to my son. "Your sister took out this loan in my name by forging my signature, and you knew about it, but you did nothing to stop her." That's not true," Michael mumbled, but I could see in his eyes that I had struck a nerve. "Enough." Olivia flung the papers onto the coffee table. "Mom, you get out of here right now, or I'm calling the police." "Call them," I said calmly. "It will be interesting to explain to the officers why you're ejecting the person in whose name the loan for its purchase was taken out." A surprised whisper rippled through the guests. Some even whistled quietly. Olivia looked as if she had been physically struck. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the guests, many of whom were now deeply uncomfortable. "I apologize for this scene. I didn't intend to spoil your evening, but I felt you should know that this beautiful house was purchased with fraudulent funds. My daughter used my identity and forged my signature to obtain a loan for $1,200,000. And then she registered the house with a shell company to conceal her actions." "That's a lie," Olivia shouted. "Mom, you agreed to help us with the loan. You gave me power of attorney." "Did I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where's that power of attorney? Why didn't you present it to the bank? Why did you find it necessary to forge my signature? And why did I only discover the loan when I received the late payment letter?" Olivia remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. David placed a hand on her shoulder as if attempting to offer support. "Mom, let's not make a scene," he said conciliatorily. "We can discuss this peacefully, say tomorrow." "No, David," I shook my head. "We already attempted to discuss things over." Olivia ignored my calls. "Michael urged me not to do anything stupid. Neither of you took the situation seriously. You assumed I would simply accept it as I always do. But not this time." I paused, circling the living room. Luxurious furniture, designer light fixtures, paintings in expensive frames, everything screamed money, money obtained through deceit. "It's a beautiful house," I said. "Too bad we'll have to sell it soon to repay the loan. Or the bank will seize it. I haven't decided which option I prefer." "You can't do that," Olivia exclaimed, taking a step towards me. "This is our home. We've worked our entire lives to afford a house like this." "No, Olivia," I objected. "You didn't work for this. You simply stole money using my name. And now you will have to answer for it." It was then that Chloe, my granddaughter, came running into the living room. She froze, sensing the palpable tension. "What's going on?" she asked, looking from her mother to me. "Grandma, why are you here?" "Hi, Chloe," I smiled at her. "I came to see your new house. It's beautiful." "Chloe, go up to your room," Olivia said sharply. "Now." "But Mom, now," Olivia repeated, raising her voice. Chloe gave me a puzzled look and reluctantly left the room. "See what you've done?" Olivia turned to me. "You've traumatized the child with your stupid accusations. No, Olivia, you're traumatizing your daughter by setting an example of dishonesty and disrespect for the law. What will she think when she learns the truth about how you acquired this house? She'll never know, Olivia gritted her teeth. Because there is no truth. It's just the fiction of a senile old woman who's jealous of her own children's success. I felt anger surge within me, but I held it in check. This was not the time or place for emotional outbursts. Fiction. I shook my head. I have proof, Olivia. Handwriting analysis that proves the signature was forged. Medical records proving I was at St. Jude's Clinic when I supposedly signed the loan agreement. Real estate records showing that the house was registered to a shell company called Caldwell Holdings. Information about loan payments made from the company's corporate account. And the testimony of Daniel Preston, a loan officer who admitted to helping you bypass the checks because of your past relationship. With every word I uttered, Olivia's face grew paler and paler. I saw fear flicker in her eyes for the first time in our entire confrontation. You're bluffing, she whispered. Daniel would never. He's already testified, I lied, hoping Victoria would forgive me for this small deception. When given the choice between assisting you and facing prosecution himself, he chose to save his own skin. Typical of men, isn't it? David was now staring at his wife with bewilderment and suspicion. Olivia, what is she talking about? Daniel? Who? Nothing, Olivia said, her voice strained. She's making it up. Then why are you so pale? David asked, his voice laced with suspicion. And why didn't you ever tell me the details of how the loan was arranged? I observed a shadow of distrust pass between the couple. David may have known about his wife's machinations in general terms, but the specifics seemed to have been deliberately withheld from him. Ladies and gentlemen, I said again to the guests, many of whom were already visibly uncomfortable. Again, I apologize for ruining your evening. But perhaps you should reconsider your association with the owners of this house. People who can deceive their own mother are unlikely to be honest with friends and colleagues. Get out of here! Olivia shouted, losing all composure. Get out of my house. Technically, it's not your house yet, I pointed out, and it won't be when the court renders its decision on my lawsuit. But I will leave because I have accomplished everything I intended to. I turned to exit, but stopped when I saw Chloe standing in the doorway. She must have overheard our conversation, her eyes wide with shock. Grandma? She whispered. Is it true? Did Mommy take the money without your permission? I looked at my granddaughter, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lie either. Yes, Chloe, I said softly. Unfortunately, it's true. But what your parents did, Chloe, it's not your fault. Chloe, don't listen to her. Olivia exclaimed. Grandma's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. I understand perfectly well, Olivia, I said. And your daughter, too, will soon understand everything. Children don't remain children forever. They grow up and begin to see their parents for who they truly are. With those words, I headed for the exit. No one attempted to stop me. I could feel the stares of the guests, surprised, sympathetic, judgmental, but I no longer cared. I had done what I had to do. The story of the lawsuit and the housewarming scandal spread through Springfield with the speed of wildfire. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, events like this cannot go unnoticed. The very next day, Grace called me, panting with excitement. Evelyn, you won't believe it. The entire town is buzzing. Ava said the guests scattered within half an hour of you leaving, and David and Olivia got into a terrible argument right there, in front of the remaining people. I listened to her account with conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was the satisfaction that the truth had finally emerged. On the other, there was the unpleasant residue of the thought that I had been the cause of my own daughter's public humiliation. She may have deserved it, but it's always agonizing for a mother to witness her child suffer, even if that child is a grown woman who has committed a crime. What about Michael? I asked. Was he there until the end too? According to Ava, he left right after you. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. The day after the housewarming scandal, my phone rang incessantly. Neighbors, former colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years called. Everyone desired details to express support, or simply to gossip. I answered politely but briefly, without elaborating. This story was painful enough as it was. I didn't need to transform it into entertainment for the curious. Towards evening, Victoria called. Ms. Reed, how are you? I hope yesterday's events didn't distress you too much. I'm fine, I replied. I'm just weary of the calls. The entire town seems to be discussing our family scandal. Unfortunately, it's unavoidable, Victoria sighed. But the good news is that after yesterday, your daughter finally received official notice of the lawsuit. Now she'll either have to respond in court or settle. You think she'll settle? I asked hesitantly. She probably would, especially if she retains a competent lawyer. Any good lawyer would advise her to avoid a public trial, given the overwhelming evidence against her. Victoria was right. 3 days later, Olivia herself called me. Her voice sounded unusually subdued. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over? Sure, I said, a little surprised by her tone. Olivia arrived an hour later. She looked gaunt with dark circles under her eyes. She was plainly dressed, eschewing her usual fashionable attire, jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. When she entered the house, she paused uncertainly in the hallway, as if she didn't know where to go next. Come into the kitchen, I said. I had just made tea. We sat down at the table, facing each other. Olivia held the cup with both hands, as if she were warming herself against it. Mom, she began after a pause, I came to discuss the lawsuit. I surmised that, I nodded. I'm listening. I hired a lawyer, Olivia said. He looked at the case file and said that she stammered, I don't have much chance of winning. The evidence was too compelling. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. He offered to settle, Olivia continued, to avoid a trial and possible criminal prosecution. And what does that settlement entail? I asked. I take over the loan, Olivia said quickly. I put it in my own name. I pay all interest and penalties. I compensate you for moral damages, $15,000. In return, you drop the lawsuit and don't file a police report. I pondered. The proposal was reasonable from a practical standpoint, but something about it made me uncomfortable. What about the house? I asked. What would happen to the house on Lakeview Heights? Olivia pressed her lips together. David and I decided to sell it. After the scandal, after everything that's happened, we can't stay there. Plus, we need the money to pay off the loan and compensate you. I understand, I nodded. And you, do you realize what you've done? What do you mean? Olivia frowned. I want to know if you comprehend the gravity of your actions, I explained. You didn't just take money without asking. You forged documents. You defrauded the bank. You jeopardized my financial security. That's a crime, Olivia. I know, she said quietly. My lawyer explained to me all the possible consequences. Up to 5 years in prison, a fine of up to $250,000, a criminal record. I'm not talking about the legal consequences, I interrupted. I'm talking about the moral side. Do you realize that you betrayed my trust? That you did to me what a daughter should never do to her mother? Olivia was silent, staring into her cup. Why did you do it? I asked. I truly want to understand. David and I have long dreamed of a house on the lake, Olivia began after a pause. But we didn't have enough money for a down payment. And then I discovered that Daniel, a former college friend of mine, was working at Liberty Savings. Friend, I said. He claimed he could help with the loan, but he needed a co-borrower with a good credit history. First I considered asking you, but then I decided it would be easier to forge my signature. I finished for her. I knew you'd say no, Olivia said with sudden bitterness. You were always so rigid, so cautious, always rejecting any risky proposition. And I wanted this house. I wanted to show everyone that I'd made something of my life, that I wasn't just a low-paid social services inspector, but a successful woman who could afford Lakeview Heights. And for that, you were willing to risk my home, my reputation, my future? I didn't think you'd find out, Olivia said quietly. We planned to pay the loan on time, no late payments. But then David had some business problems and we missed a payment. And the bank sent you a notice. I nodded. That's how I found out. We didn't talk for a moment. It was starting to rain outside the window, the drops tapping on the eaves. A quiet, monotonous, soothing sound. Well, I said at last, I'll consider your settlement offer, but I'll need to consult with my lawyer. Of course, Olivia nodded quickly. I understand. But Mom, please don't take this to court. It would ruin my career. I'd lose my job. And Chloe, she'd be so embarrassed in front of her friends. I looked at my daughter and I didn't see remorse. I saw fear. Fear of the consequences, not shame for what she'd done. She still didn't realize that the main problem wasn't a threat to her career or reputation, but that she had betrayed her own mother. "I'll give you an answer in a few days," I said. "I need to think it over." Olivia left, leaving behind a feeling of incompleteness. I saw no genuine remorse in her, only a desire to avoid trouble, and it made me question the idea of a settlement. The next day Michael arrived. Unlike his sister, he was aggressive from the start. "Mom, this has gone too far. Do you realize you're destroying our family with your actions?" "I'm not destroying the family, Michael," I said calmly. "It was you and Olivia when you decided that you could use me for your own purposes." "Oh my God, that's so melodramatic." He rolled his eyes. "No one was using you. Olivia just wanted a better life for her family. She always wanted a house on the lake, and she decided to get it at my expense," I said. "It's called fraud, Michael, and you knew it, but you didn't do anything to stop your sister." Michael paced the room nervously. "Look, I didn't know all the details, okay? Olivia told me that you had an agreement, that you agreed to help with the loan. And you believed it?" I grinned. "After knowing me all my life, did you truly believe that I agreed to take out a loan for almost $1 million? "I don't know," Michael shrugged. "Maybe you finally decided to do something useful for your kids." His words hit me like a slap in the face. Finally decided to do something useful? As if all the years of caring, of love, of support meant nothing. As if I owed them something more, on top of what I had already given. "Go away," I said quietly. "Now." "Mom, don't be so dramatic." Michael tried to take my hand. "I just want you to withdraw the suit. Olivia is already being punished. Everyone is talking. David is on the verge of divorce. The house will have to be sold." "Go away," I said again. "I'm not discussing this with you, especially after what you just said." Michael wanted to object, but something in my face stopped him. He sighed and headed for the door. "You're going to regret this, Mom, when you're all alone." After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking out the window and thinking, maybe Michael was right. Maybe I was being too harsh on Olivia. After all, she was my daughter, whatever her mistakes. But then I remembered her face when she talked about the possible consequences to her career. Not a word about how her actions affected me. Not a hint of understanding that she had done something irreparably wrong to her own mother. I called Victoria and told her about Olivia's offer. "Legally, it's a reasonable offer," the lawyer said. "You'll be compensated and released from your loan obligations. But of course, the decision is yours. What happens if we go forward with the lawsuit?" I asked. "Given the evidence, the court will almost certainly rule in your favor," Victoria replied. "The bank will be obligated to cancel the loan agreement as fraudulent. And then there are two options. Either the bank goes to the police to report fraud, or it tries to recover the money from your daughter in civil proceedings." "And the house?" "The house would most likely be seized to repay the loan as it is collateral for the loan." I mused. Oddly enough, the prospect of losing the house worried me the least. After all, it wasn't my house. I hadn't even been in it once before that evening. More important was the question, what would Olivia truly learn if I simply agreed to a settlement? "I need to think about it," I said to Victoria. "I'll let you know what I decide." That night, I received another call from Grace. "Evelyn, have you heard the latest news? David's left Olivia. They say he was furious when he found out about the loan. Turns out she didn't tell him everything either." I sighed. Not that I harbored any particular sympathy for David, but the fracturing of a family couldn't bring me joy, especially since he and Olivia had a daughter. "What about Chloe?" I asked. "Still living with her mother, but word is David is going to seek joint custody." The problems were multiplying like a snowball. I didn't want my granddaughter to suffer because of this story, but was it my fault? Hadn't Olivia's actions set off this chain of events? I stayed up all night, contemplating the situation. By morning, I had decided I wasn't going to settle. Let the court hear the case and deliver a fair judgment. Only then would Olivia truly grasp the gravity of her actions. The trial began a month later. Olivia had hired an expensive lawyer from the capital, who built a defense on the assertion that I had allegedly given verbal consent to the loan. But when Victoria presented her evidence, the handwriting analyses, the medical documents proving my alibi, testimony from bank employees, it became clear that the defense stood no chance. The judge, an elderly woman with a discerning eye, listened carefully to both sides. At the end of the second session, she said, "The evidence unequivocally demonstrates that Ms. Caldwell acted without her mother's consent and forged her signature on loan documents. Such acts clearly fall within the definition of fraud and forgery. However, given the familial relationship between the plaintiff and the defendant, I suggest that the parties reconsider the possibility of a settlement. This court is adjourned for 1 week." During the recess, Olivia approached me in the court hallway. She looked exhausted and profoundly depressed. "Mom, please let's just end this. You see what's coming next. I could lose everything, my job, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. Think of Chloe. What would it be like for her to live with the stigma of being the daughter of a criminal?" I looked at her, and I didn't see a repentant daughter, but a person desperately trying to evade responsibility for her actions until the last possible moment. Even now, she was only thinking about herself and using Chloe as a means to pressure me. "You should have thought about Chloe before you committed the crime," I said quietly. "And the example you set for your daughter with your actions, is that what this is about?" Olivia grinned bitterly. "Are you trying to teach me a lesson? To prove that mom's always right? To get revenge for all the years I disobeyed you?" "No, Olivia," I shook my head. "I just want justice. And I want you to finally realize that your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for other people." Olivia looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You know what? Do whatever you want. But after this, I don't think of you as my mother anymore. And you can forget about having a granddaughter." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the empty hallway with a heavy heart. Her words hurt deeply, but they did not shake my resolve. If that was the price of justice, I was willing to pay it. A week later, the court ruled decisively in my favor. The loan agreement was declared null and void, and the bank was ordered to cancel all my obligations under it. Olivia was mandated to pay me compensation in the amount of $25,000 for moral damages. The judge also noted that the bank reserved the right to involve law enforcement agencies regarding the fraud, but this decision was left to the discretion of the financial institution. After the ruling was announced, Olivia walked past me without a word or glance in my direction. Michael, who was also seated in the courtroom, defiantly turned away. I was alone, save for Victoria and Grace, who had steadfastly supported me throughout the trial. "You won, Ms. Reed," Victoria said, shaking my hand. "Justice has been served." "Yes," I nodded. "But at what cost?" "Sometimes there's a price to pay for the truth," Victoria said philosophically. "The question is whether it's worth the price." I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer to that question at that moment. The consequences of the lawsuit were not long in coming. The bank chose not to involve the police, preferring to resolve the matter amicably. They seized the house on Lakeview Heights to pay off the loan. Olivia and Chloe had to relocate to a small apartment in another part of town. David filed for divorce, seeking joint custody of their daughter. Michael ceased returning my calls. His wife Sarah, with whom I'd always had a cool relationship, called one day to inform me they didn't wish me to have contact with their children. "They're too impressionable for family dramas," she stated. I found myself utterly isolated. The children and grandchildren, who had been less than eager to socialize with me before, had now completely severed relations. I became a pariah in my own family. Strangely, I didn't feel as bitter as I had anticipated. Was I in pain? Of course. I had lost my children and grandchildren, perhaps forever. But at the same time, I had gained something equally important: self-respect and freedom from the toxic relationships that had been eating away at my soul for years. Grace became my greatest support during this period. She stopped by almost every day, bringing freshly baked goods, sharing city news, simply being there for me. It was she who suggested I embark on a new chapter in my life. "Evelyn, how many years have you been living for others?" she asked me one day over a cup of tea. "First for your husband, then for your children. And when was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something you dreamed of but constantly postponed?" I pondered. Truly, when? Perhaps before I had children or even before marriage. "You see," Grace exclaimed, noticing my confusion. "It's time to rectify this. You're free. You have a small savings plus the compensation from the court. What would you like to do? Where would you like to go? What would you like to learn?" "I don't know," I confessed, bewildered. "It's been so long since I've thought about my own desires." "Then let's start small," Grace said firmly. I've signed us up for computer classes at the community center. Twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It starts next Tuesday. Computer literacy? I was surprised. Why? Because the world doesn't stand still and neither should we, Grace smiled. Besides, it'll be fun. Imagine us laughing at each other's clumsy attempts to master these modern contraptions. I agreed, though with some hesitation. I had thought it was too late to acquire new skills at my age. But Grace was adamant, and she was right. The course proved to be precisely what I needed, not so much for the knowledge I gained, although I did learn a great deal, but for the atmosphere. There were people my age facing similar challenges and interests, people who didn't view me as a burden or a source of potential inheritance, people with whom I could socialize as an equal. About a month into the course, I received a call from Victoria. Ms. Reed, I have news for you. Liberty Savings and Loan is offering you an additional $20,000 for moral damages. They have admitted that their employee, Daniel Preston, violated their screening procedures when processing the loan, and they wish to avoid further proceedings. Well, that's fair enough, I said. If the bank had been more vigilant, none of this would have happened. Quite right, Victoria agreed. I'll prepare all the necessary documents. How are you, by the way? Surprisingly well, I said honestly. Of course, I miss spending time with my grandchildren, but otherwise I feel freer than I have in years. I'm glad to hear that. Victoria sounded genuinely pleased. You know, I've seen many cases like this, and often people, even if they win in court, feel like they've lost because of fractured relationships. But you seem to have found something positive in this situation. Yes, I suppose so, I agreed. I realize that I can live for myself, not just for my children, and that my value as a human being does not depend on their attitude towards me. Having received additional compensation from the bank, for the first time in my life, I was the owner of a rather substantial sum of money, which I could dispose of at my own discretion. Previously, all my savings were either allocated to my family's needs or meticulously saved for a rainy day. Now I could afford something I had long dreamed of, but never dared to pursue. You should go on a trip, Grace urged me. Remember when you always wanted to see Italy? That was a long time ago, I smiled. Even before the kids were born. Arthur promised we'd go there for our silver wedding, but then my health problems started and I never had time to travel. Then make up for lost time. Grace winked. Imagine, Venice, gondolas, narrow streets, cafes on Piazza San Marco. Would you come with me? I asked suddenly. Grace froze, a teacup halfway to her lips. Me? But I thought you'd want to go alone. Why would I want to go alone? I shook my head. It would be much more enjoyable with two people. Besides, you've always been braver than me. If I get confused, you'll know exactly what to do. Grace smiled. You know, I've never been to Europe. I've always wanted to, but there were always children, grandchildren, and commitments. Yes, Evelyn, she said. I'll go. Good, I said.